The conference room on the 48th floor of Sterling Industries headquarters was filled with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. 23 candidates had already been interviewed for the position of Chief Innovation Officer, and 23 candidates had been rejected. The board members sat around the massive mahogany table, their faces showing various degrees of frustration, confusion, and exhaustion. Some checked their watches discreetly, others whispered to each other, but everyone's attention kept returning to the man at the head of the table. Marcus Sterling, founder and CEO of Sterling Industries, was a legend in the business world. At 52 years old, he had built his company from a small tech startup in his garage to a multi-billion-dollar empire that touched every aspect of modern life. From smartphones to sustainable energy, from artificial intelligence to urban planning, Sterling Industries was everywhere. Forbes had called him a visionary. Time magazine had named him Person of the Year. But right now, sitting in his custom-made leather chair with his fingers steepled in front of his face, he looked more like a man who had lost faith in humanity. The door opened and the 24th candidate walked in. Her name was Dr. Jennifer Walsh, and her resume was impeccable. PhD from MIT, former head of research at 3 Fortune 500 companies, holder of 47 patents, and author of 2 best-selling books on innovation. She wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never failed at anything in her life. Marcus gestured to the empty chair across from him. Dr. Walsh sat down, crossed her legs professionally, and smiled. It was a smile that said she already knew she had the job. For the next hour, she dazzled the board with her answers. She spoke eloquently about disruptive technology, about blue ocean strategies, about paradigm shifts and exponential growth. She presented case studies from her previous work, complete with graphs and statistics that she seemed to pull from memory. The board members nodded approvingly. This was exactly what they had been looking for. This was the person who could take Sterling Industries to the next level. But Marcus remained silent, his expression unreadable. When Dr. Walsh finished her presentation, he leaned forward slightly and asked the question he had asked every single candidate that day. "Tell me, Dr. Walsh, what is the most important thing a company can create?" Dr. Walsh did not hesitate. Innovation, of course. A company that stops innovating is a company that dies. We need to constantly push boundaries, challenge assumptions, and create products that customers don't even know they need yet. That's what makes a company truly great. Marcus nodded slowly. That's a good answer. It's the same answer that 14 other candidates gave me today. Thank you for your time. The smile froze on Dr. Walsh's face. "I'm sorry, are you saying I didn't get the position?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." "But I don't understand. My qualifications are exceptional. My track record speaks for itself. What more could you possibly want?" Marcus stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Something different," he said quietly. "Something real." Dr. Walsh gathered her things with barely concealed anger and left the room. The door closed behind her with a definitive click. The board members erupted into conversation. "Marcus, this is getting ridiculous," said Catherine Moore, the chief financial officer. She had been with the company since the early days and was one of the few people who could speak to Marcus so directly. "We've been at this for 8 hours. Every candidate has been more than qualified. What exactly are you looking for?" Marcus turned from the window. "I'll know it when I hear it." "That's not good enough," said Robert Chen, head of operations. "We have shareholders to answer to. We have quarterly reports to file. We need to fill this position, and we need to do it now. Any one of these candidates would be perfectly suitable."
Suitable, Marcus repeated, his voice heavy with disappointment. That's the problem right there. You're all thinking about what's suitable, what's acceptable, what checks all the boxes. But that's not what's going to save this company. Save the company? Catherine's eyebrows shot up. Marcus, we're posting record profits. Our stock price is at an all-time high. What are you talking about?
Marcus returned to his seat and placed both hands flat on the table. 6 months ago, I received a report from our internal research team. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it to the center of the table. This report tells me that despite our success, despite our growth, despite all our innovations, we are failing at the one thing that actually matters. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time low. Customer loyalty is declining. Our products are technically superior, but emotionally empty. We're creating things, yes, but we're not creating meaning. We're not creating connection. We're not creating anything that actually makes people's lives better in a way that matters. The board members exchanged uncertain glances. James Hartford, the head of marketing, cleared his throat. With all due respect, Marcus, that's a bit philosophical. We're a business, not a charity. Our job is to create value for shareholders. Marcus's eyes flashed. And that attitude is exactly why we're in this situation. He stood up again, too restless to remain seated. 20 years ago, when I started this company in my garage, I wasn't thinking about shareholders. I was thinking about my mother. She worked 3 jobs to raise me and my sister after my father left. She barely had time to sleep, let alone enjoy life. I wanted to create something that would make life easier for people like her. Something that would give them back time, give them back joy, give them back their humanity. He paused, his jaw tightening. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. We became obsessed with markets and metrics, with disruption and domination. We started creating products because we could, not because we should. And now we're one of the most successful companies in the world. But I can't remember the last time someone told me our products actually changed their life in a meaningful way. The room fell silent. Finally, Sarah Martinez, the youngest board member and head of human resources, spoke up. So, what you're really looking for is someone who understands that human element. Someone who can bring soul back to the company. Marcus pointed at her. Exactly. I'm looking for someone who understands that business isn't just about profits and products. It's about people. Real people with real problems and real dreams. But surely Dr. Walsh could have provided that, Robert protested. She's incredibly accomplished.
She's accomplished at playing the game, Marcus countered. She knows all the right buzzwords, all the right theories, all the right strategies. But when I asked her what the most important thing a company can create is, she said innovation. That's what her brain told her to say, what her education told her to say, what her experience told her to say. But it's not what her heart would say if she let herself listen to it. Catherine sighed. So what's the right answer? What do you want to hear? I don't want to hear anything specific, Marcus said. I want to hear something true, something that comes from genuine understanding, not from textbooks or case studies or board meetings. I want to hear from someone who remembers what it's like to struggle, to worry, to hope. Someone who hasn't been insulated by success. That's a tall order, James muttered. Where are you going to find someone like that? We've already interviewed every qualified candidate in the city. Then maybe we need to look beyond the usual pool, Marcus said. He checked his watch. It's past 7. Let's call it a day. We'll resume tomorrow. The board members began gathering their things, clearly relieved to finally be leaving. As they filed out of the conference room, Marcus remained behind, staring out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. He felt tired, not just physically, but spiritually. Maybe he was being unreasonable. Maybe he was asking for something that didn't exist. As he stood there lost in thought, he heard the door open. He turned, expecting to see Catherine, or perhaps his assistant, but instead he saw an older man in a custodian's uniform pushing a cleaning cart. The man stopped when he saw Marcus. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I didn't know anyone was still here. I can come back later." No, it's fine," Marcus said, waving him in. "Please, do what you need to do." The janitor, whose name tag read Thomas, began emptying the trash cans around the room. He worked quietly and efficiently, and Marcus found himself watching the man. There was something peaceful about his movements, something dignified in the way he went about his work. "Long day," Thomas said, conversationally, as he wiped down the table. "You could say that," Marcus replied. "We've been interviewing for a position. Can't seem to find the right person." Thomas nodded as he sprayed cleaner on the table's surface. "That's tough. Finding the right fit is important, not just for the company, but for the person too. Nothing worse than being in a place where you don't belong." "Have you been with Sterling Industries long?" Marcus asked, suddenly curious. "Going on 15 years now," Thomas said with a smile. "Started about a month after my daughter was born. She's in high school now, believe it or not. Time flies." 15 years, Marcus repeated. "You must have seen a lot of changes." "Oh yes," Thomas said, moving to the windows to wipe them down. "When I started, this building was half the size it is now. You'd walk through the halls and everyone knew everyone's name. Now, it's so big, you can work here for years and never meet half the people on your own floor. Do you like working here?" The question came out before Marcus could stop himself. Thomas paused in his cleaning and considered the question seriously. "I like providing for my family. I like that the pay is fair and the benefits are good. I like that I can help my daughter with her homework at night and take her to her basketball games on weekends without worrying about making rent." "That's not quite what I asked," Marcus said gently. Thomas smiled, a bit sadly. "No, I suppose it's not." He was quiet for a moment, then continued. "Can I be honest with you, Mr. Sterling? Please, I used to like it more. Years ago, there was this feeling around here, like we were all part of something special. People would stay late not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They'd talk excitedly about the projects they were working on, about how what we were doing was going to help people. Now, everyone seems stressed, burned out. They stare at their screens all day and don't really see each other anymore. It's like we're all just going through the motions." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "That's very perceptive. I notice things," Thomas said with a shrug. "People don't really see janitors, you know. We're invisible. But that means we see everything. We see the young programmer crying in the bathroom because she's so overwhelmed. We see the executives eating lunch alone at their desks because they don't have time for anything else. We see the waste, too. So much waste. Food thrown away, barely touched. Products in the development lab that cost millions but will never see the light of day because they don't fit the quarterly projections." He stopped himself and looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I'm talking too much. That's not my place." "No," Marcus said quickly. "Please, continue. I want to hear this." Thomas studied Marcus's face, seeming to decide whether he was serious. Then he put down his cleaning supplies and leaned against the wall. "Mr. Sterling, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you start this company?" Marcus was surprised by the question. "I wanted to make life better for people like my mother, who work themselves to the bone just to survive." "And do you think that's what you're doing now?" The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. Finally, he said, "I don't know anymore." Thomas nodded. "My daughter, she's 15, smart as a whip. She wants to be an engineer, wants to work for a company like this someday. But you know what she told me last week? She said, 'Dad, I don't want to work somewhere that makes my soul feel empty.' That's what she said. Soul? A 15-year-old girl worried about her soul? What did you tell her?" "I told her to find work that matters. Not work that pays the most or looks the best on a resume, but work that matters. Work that makes her feel like she's contributing something real to the world." "And what did she say?" "She asked me how she'd know if something matters." Thomas smiled, and I told her it's simple. If it makes someone's life genuinely better, even in a small way, it matters. If it creates connection instead of distance, it matters. If it serves people instead of just serving profit, it matters. Marcus felt something shifting inside him, like a door opening after being closed for years. That's beautiful. That's exactly what I've been trying to articulate all day. "Well, it's easy for me to say it," Thomas said. "I'm not the one running a billion-dollar company. I'm just a janitor who empties trash cans and mops floors." "Just a janitor," Marcus repeated quietly. "Tell me something, Thomas. What do you think is the most important thing a company can create?" Thomas didn't hesitate. "Dignity." Marcus stared at him. "Say that again?" "Dignity," Thomas repeated. "See, anyone can create a product. Anyone with enough money and smart people can create innovation. But creating dignity, that's rare. That's special. Dignity means people feel valued. It means their work matters, their voice matters, their humanity matters. It means customers aren't just wallets to extract money from, but people whose lives you genuinely want to improve. It means employees aren't just resources to exploit, but partners in building something meaningful." He picked up his spray bottle again, as if embarrassed by his own eloquence. When a company creates dignity, everything else follows. People work harder because they feel respected. Customers stay loyal because they feel valued. Innovation happens naturally because people are engaged and passionate. But if you lose dignity, if you treat people like numbers on a spreadsheet, then it doesn't matter how successful you are. You failed at the one thing that actually matters. Marcus stood there, stunned into silence. After 23 interviews with the most educated, accomplished, experienced candidates in the country, it was a janitor who had given him the answer he'd been searching for. "Thomas, how much do you know about innovation strategy?" Marcus asked. Thomas laughed. "Not much, I'd guess. I only finished high school, never went to college." "What about market analysis, business theory, organizational management?" "Can't say I'm an expert in any of those things." Marcus smiled, and it was the first genuine smile he'd worn all day. "Perfect. Thomas, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. How would you like to be the Chief Innovation Officer of Sterling Industries?" Thomas's mouth fell open. He looked at Marcus like he'd lost his mind. "Mr. Sterling, I think maybe you've been working too long today. I'm a janitor. I clean floors. I empty trash. I don't know the first thing about running a division of a major corporation." "You know the most important thing," Marcus countered. "You understand dignity. You understand people. Everything else can be learned, but that fundamental human understanding, that's rare." "But I'm not qualified," Thomas protested. "I don't have the education, the experience, the credentials." "Do you care about people?" "Yes, of course." "Do you want to make their lives better? More than anything. Do you believe this company should exist to serve humanity, not just to extract profit from it?"
"I do. I really do." "Then you're more qualified than anyone I spoke to today." Marcus walked over and stood in front of Thomas. Look, I'm not saying it would be easy. You'd need to learn a lot and learn it quickly. We'd provide training, mentorship, support. But what I need, what this company desperately needs, is someone who hasn't forgotten what it's like to be on the ground level. Someone who remembers that behind every product we make, every service we provide, there are real people with real lives. Thomas's hands were shaking. Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. This is crazy. The board would never accept it. Let me worry about the board, Marcus said. Right now, I'm asking you. Are you willing to try? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Can I think about it overnight? Talk to my wife? Of course. Take all the time you need. Thomas finished his cleaning in a daze. When he left the conference room, Marcus sat back down at the table and called Catherine. She answered on the second ring, sounding tired. What is it, Marcus? I found our Chief Innovation Officer. Really? Who? The janitor. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, I must have misheard you. Did you just say the janitor? His name is Thomas, and tomorrow morning I'm going to offer him the position officially. Marcus, have you lost your mind? Catherine's voice rose. You can't make a janitor the CIO of a Fortune 500 company. The board will revolt, the shareholders will have a fit, the press will destroy us. Maybe, Marcus said calmly, or maybe this is exactly the kind of bold move that will remind everyone what this company is really about. It's professional suicide, yours and his. Catherine, do you remember why you joined Sterling Industries? It was 19 years ago. You were working at Goldman Sachs, making twice what I could pay you. But you left that job to come work for a startup with no guaranteed future. Why did you do that? Catherine was quiet. Finally, she said, Because you told me you wanted to build something different, something that mattered. Exactly. And somewhere along the way, we lost that. We became just another corporation obsessed with quarterly earnings and market share. But Thomas, this janitor, he reminded me tonight what it's all about. He talked about dignity, about creating work that matters, about serving people, not just extracting value from them. That's lovely in theory, Catherine said, but theory doesn't run a company.
No, but people do. Real people with real hearts and real souls. And I'd rather have someone with heart and no credentials than someone with all the credentials in the world and no soul. Catherine sighed. I can see I'm not going to change your mind. No, you're not. Fine. But when the board revolts tomorrow, don't say I didn't warn you. They hung up, and Marcus sat alone in the quiet conference room. Outside, the city stretched out before him, millions of lights representing millions of lives. He thought about all those lives, all those people trying to make their way in the world, trying to find meaning and purpose and dignity. Tomorrow would be interesting, that was certain. But for the first time in months, Marcus felt excited about the future. The next morning, Thomas arrived at Sterling Industries at his usual time, 5:30 a.m. He always came in early, before the main workforce arrived, to clean the executive floors. His wife, Maria, had stayed up with him most of the night, talking about Marcus's offer. You have to take it, she had said. When does an opportunity like this come along? But I'm not qualified, Thomas had protested. I'll fail. I'll embarrass myself and our family. Maria had taken his face in her hands. Thomas, you are the smartest, most capable man I know. You notice things other people miss. You care about people when everyone else only cares about themselves. That man didn't offer you the job because he felt sorry for you. He offered it because he saw something special in you. What if he's wrong? What if there's nothing special about me? Then you'll have tried, and you'll have shown our daughter that you don't let fear stop you from reaching for something better. So now, Thomas walked through the early morning quiet of Sterling Industries, pushing his cleaning cart, trying to imagine himself as something other than a janitor. It seemed impossible. But then again, 15 years ago, the idea of working for a prestigious company like Sterling Industries had seemed impossible too. He was cleaning the hallway outside Marcus's office when he heard voices. The board members were arriving early. Thomas tried to make himself invisible, as he usually did, but he couldn't help overhearing their conversation. "This is insane," a man's voice said. It was Robert Chen. "We can't let him do this." "How are we going to stop him?" That was Sarah Martinez. "He's the founder and majority shareholder. Technically, he can do whatever he wants."
"But the press," James Hartford said. "Can you imagine the headlines? Billionaire CEO appoints janitor to executive position? They'll make us look like a joke." "Maybe that's not what will happen," Catherine's voice cut in. "Maybe the press will see it as a human interest story, rags to riches, the American dream, that kind of thing."
"Or maybe they'll see it as proof that Marcus has finally lost touch with reality," Robert countered. Thomas felt his stomach twist. He should take the cart and leave, go clean somewhere else. But his feet wouldn't move. The voices grew closer. The board members were walking toward the conference room. Thomas kept his head down, scrubbing at an already clean spot on the wall. "Thomas," Marcus's voice made him jump. "Good, you're here. Come with me, please." The board members stared as Marcus led Thomas into the conference room. Once everyone was seated, Marcus stood at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming in early. I know this is unusual, but I wanted to address this situation before we officially move forward." He gestured to Thomas, who stood awkwardly near the door, still in his janitor's uniform. "This is Thomas. He's worked for Sterling Industries for 15 years. Last night, I offered him the position of Chief Innovation Officer, and this morning, he's going to give me his answer." All eyes turned to Thomas. He felt like he might throw up. "But before he does," Marcus continued, "I want to explain my reasoning. Yesterday, we interviewed 23 highly qualified candidates. Every one of them gave me the answers they thought I wanted to hear. They spoke about innovation, disruption, market domination. They were all very impressive. They were also all very wrong." Marcus walked over to the window, his favorite thinking spot. What they didn't understand, what we have collectively forgotten, is that business is fundamentally about human beings. Not markets, not metrics, not even products. Human beings. And somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of that. He turned back to face the board. "Last night, I asked Thomas what he thought was the most important thing a company could create. And do you know what he said? He said dignity. Not innovation, not profit, dignity. The idea that every person, whether they're a customer or an employee or a shareholder, deserves to be treated with fundamental respect and humanity." "That's a nice sentiment," Robert said, "but with all due respect, sentiment doesn't run a company."
"Doesn't it?" Marcus challenged. "Tell me, Robert, why do you think our employee satisfaction scores have plummeted? Why do you think we're struggling with retention despite offering competitive salaries? Why do you think customers are increasingly choosing our competitors even though our products are technically superior?" Robert opened his mouth, then closed it. "I'll tell you why," Marcus said. "Because people can feel when they're not valued. Employees can feel when they're seen as replaceable resources. Customers can feel when they're viewed as just revenue streams. And increasingly, they're voting with their feet." "So, your solution is to put someone with zero executive experience in charge of innovation?" James asked incredulously. "My solution is to put someone who understands people in charge of innovating for people," Marcus corrected. "Think about it. Thomas has spent 15 years observing this company from a perspective none of us have.
He's seen how decisions made in this room affect the people on every floor of this building. He's noticed things we're too insulated to notice. Sarah leaned forward. I actually think there might be something to this. We talk all the time about thinking outside the box, about disruption. Well, this is truly outside the box. It's also potentially disastrous, Robert said. What happens when he has to present to shareholders, when he has to negotiate with vendors, when he has to make decisions that affect thousands of employees? Then he'll learn, Marcus said simply. The same way all of us learned. The same way I learned when I started this company with nothing but an idea and determination. He looked at Thomas. But I need to know if you're willing to try. No one can make this decision for you. Thomas's mouth was dry. Every instinct told him to run, to decline politely, to go back to his comfortable, predictable life. But then he thought about his daughter. He thought about the world she was growing up in, the kind of work she would do, the kind of life she would lead. He cleared his throat. Can I say something? Marcus nodded. I'm terrified, Thomas admitted. I'm terrified of failing. I'm terrified of embarrassing myself and this company. I'm terrified that Mr. Sterling is making a mistake, and I'm terrified of letting him down. He paused. But I'm more terrified of teaching my daughter that when opportunity knocks, you hide because you're afraid. He looked at each board member in turn. You're right that I don't have education or credentials. You're right that I've never managed people or made executive decisions. But I know what it's like to work a job where you're invisible, where no one sees you as a complete human being. I know what it's like to worry about making rent, to skip meals so your family can eat. I know what it's like to dream about something better, but feel like it's forever out of reach. His voice grew stronger. Mr. Sterling asked me what a company should create. I said dignity, because that's what I've been hungry for my whole working life. Dignity. The feeling that my work matters, that my voice matters, that I'm more than just a number on a spreadsheet. And if there's even a chance I can help create that feeling for other people, for the customers who use our products and the employees who work here, then I have to try. The room was silent. Catherine was watching Thomas with something like wonder on her face. Even Robert looked thoughtful. I'll need help, Thomas continued. I'll need training and mentorship and patience. I'll make mistakes, probably lots of them. But I promise you this, I will work harder than I've ever worked in my life. I will listen to everyone, from the newest intern to the most senior executive. And I will never, never forget that behind every decision we make, there are real people whose lives will be affected. Marcus smiled. Is that a yes? Thomas took a deep breath. Yes, it's a yes. The board members looked at each other. Finally, Catherine spoke. I think we should take a vote. All in favor of appointing Thomas as Chief Innovation Officer, with the understanding that he'll undergo intensive training and have a 6-month probationary period? Sarah's hand went up immediately. Catherine raised hers. James hesitated, then raised his. Robert was the last, sitting with his arms crossed, clearly unhappy. But finally, grudgingly, his hand went up too. It's unanimous, Marcus said. Welcome to the executive team, Thomas. The next few months were the most challenging of Thomas's life. He woke up at 4 a.m. every day to read books on business strategy, innovation theory, and organizational management. Marcus assigned him a mentor, a retired executive named Dr. Patricia Williams, who had helped launch 3 successful startups. She was tough but fair, pushing Thomas to think critically and challenge his own assumptions. The press reaction was mixed. Some outlets ran feel-good stories about the janitor who became an executive, framing it as a modern Cinderella story. Others were more cynical.
calling it a publicity stunt, or suggesting that Marcus had lost his edge. The business journals were particularly harsh, with one prominent analyst predicting that Sterling Industries would lose market share within the quarter. But Thomas focused on the work. His first major initiative was something he called the Dignity Project. He proposed creating an internal task force that would examine every aspect of how Sterling Industries operated, from how they treated employees, to how they designed products, to how they communicated with customers. "That sounds expensive," Robert said at the first meeting where Thomas presented his idea. "What's the ROI?" Thomas had learned enough business language to understand the question. "The return on investment might not show up in the next quarterly report," he admitted, "but I believe it will show up in employee retention, in customer loyalty, in brand reputation. People want to work for companies that value them. They want to buy from companies that respect them. Right now, we're losing both because we've forgotten that." He pulled up a slide, something Dr. Williams had helped him prepare. "This is data from our own HR department. In the last 2 years, employee turnover has increased by 38%. Exit interview data shows that the number one reason people leave is that they feel undervalued and overworked. We're spending millions on recruitment and training to replace these people. What if we spent that money instead on creating a work environment where people want to stay?" Catherine was nodding. "That actually makes economic sense." "And here's customer data," Thomas continued, pulling up another slide. "Our customer satisfaction scores have dropped 12 points in the same period. When asked why they're switching to competitors, the most common response is that they feel like we don't listen to their needs. They say our products are impressive, but not actually useful for their daily lives." "So what's your proposal?" Sarah asked.
Thomas took a deep breath. "I want to start with listening. Real listening. Not just surveys and focus groups. I want to create opportunities for employees at every level to give honest feedback without fear of retaliation. I want to send teams out to observe how customers actually use our products in their real lives, not in controlled test environments. I want to understand what dignity looks like from their perspective, and then I want to redesign everything we do around that understanding." "That's a massive undertaking," James said. "It would affect every department." "Yes, it would," Thomas agreed. "That's the point. Creating dignity can't be just one department's job. It has to be baked into everything we do." Marcus, who had been quiet throughout the presentation, finally spoke. "I think it's brilliant. Let's do it." The Dignity Project launched with a small pilot team. Thomas personally interviewed employees from every level of the company, from mailroom clerks to senior vice presidents. What he discovered was both heartbreaking and illuminating. People felt disconnected from the company's mission. They felt their work lacked meaning. They felt crushed under impossible deadlines and unrealistic expectations. One young programmer told Thomas about working 70-hour weeks for months on end, missing her daughter's school play and her father's birthday. "For what?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "So we can release a product update 2 weeks earlier? Is that really worth the cost?" Another employee, a customer service representative, described feeling like a punching bag. "Customers yell at me all day about problems with products I had no part in creating. And when I try to escalate their concerns, I'm told to just handle it and keep the call times down. I'm not helping people. I'm just absorbing their anger." Thomas compiled all of this feedback into a comprehensive report. He presented it to the board on a Friday afternoon, 6 months after taking the position. "This is what we've created," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "A place where talented, caring people are ground down until they become cynical and exhausted. a place where profits have become more important than people. We can do better. We must do better. He outlined a series of recommendations: flexible work schedules, mental health resources, a cap on overtime hours. More importantly, he proposed fundamentally rethinking how they developed products. Instead of creating technology and then trying to find uses for it, he suggested starting with human needs and working backwards. We should be asking, what do people actually need? He said. What would make their lives genuinely better? And then we should create those things, even if they're not as flashy or impressive as what our competitors are doing. That's not how innovation works, Robert protested. You innovate by pushing boundaries, not by asking people what they want. Henry Ford said if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, James added. Thomas shook his head. But Ford wasn't just making things for the sake of making them. He was trying to solve a real problem: how to make transportation accessible to regular people. That's what I'm talking about. Solving real problems for real people, not just creating impressive technology for its own sake. He pulled up his final slide. I've been studying our product line. We have 17 different smart home devices. 17. Does anyone actually need 17 different devices to control their home? Or have we created complexity for the sake of appearing innovative? The room was quiet. Finally, Catherine said, "So what would you propose?" "Integration," Thomas said immediately. "Instead of 17 separate devices, what if we created one system that actually works seamlessly? What if we made it so simple that my 70-year-old mother could use it without calling me 5 times for help? What if we focused on making people's lives easier instead of making them feel stupid for not understanding our technology?" Marcus was smiling. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. Over the next year, Sterling Industries began to transform. It wasn't easy. There was resistance from middle managers who were used to doing things a certain way. There were setbacks and failures. But slowly, things began to change. The company implemented flexible work schedules and saw productivity actually increase as employees felt more balanced and valued. They consolidated product lines, focusing on creating fewer, better things instead of overwhelming customers with options. They redesigned their customer service approach, giving representatives more authority to actually solve problems instead of just following scripts. Thomas personally led the initiative to redesign their flagship product, a smartphone that had been losing market share to competitors. Instead of adding more features, they stripped it down to essentials and focused on making those essentials work perfectly. They interviewed hundreds of users about their frustrations and desires. They watched how people actually used phones in their daily lives. The result was revolutionary in its simplicity. The new phone had fewer bells and whistles than competitors, but everything it did beautifully. The battery lasted 3 days. The interface was intuitive enough for a child or grandparent to use. The camera was optimized not for professional photography, but for capturing memories quickly and easily. When they launched it, analysts were skeptical, but customers loved it. Within 6 months, Sterling Industries had regained the market share they'd lost, and then some. More importantly, customer satisfaction scores climbed to their highest levels ever. The turning point came when a viral video appeared online. It showed an elderly woman FaceTiming with her grandchildren for the first time, tears of joy streaming down her face. "My grandson set this up for me," she said in the video, "and I can actually use it without help. I get to see my babies every day now. This phone gave me back my family. Thomas watched the video in his office, the office that still felt too big and fancy for someone like him. But he wasn't a janitor anymore. He was the chief innovation officer who had helped create something that mattered. There was a knock on his door. Marcus walked in and sat down across from him. "Congratulations," Marcus said. "The board just approved your permanent position. No more probationary period." Thomas smiled. "I still can't believe this is real sometimes." "It's real, and you've earned it. The company is transforming in ways I'd only dreamed of." "I had help," Thomas said. "A lot of help."
"That's another thing you brought," Marcus said. "You're not afraid to ask for help, to admit what you don't know. That's created a culture where everyone feels like it's okay to collaborate, to lean on each other." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You know what the most amazing thing is? Our profits are up, significantly up. All this focus on dignity and people, it's actually good for business. Who would have thought?" Thomas laughed. "Maybe that's because when people feel valued, they do their best work. When customers feel respected, they stay loyal. It's not complicated." "No," Marcus agreed, "it's not. But it took you to remind us of that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Thomas said, "I've been thinking. We should do for our suppliers and contractors what we've done internally. A lot of the people who make our products, the factory workers, the warehouse staff, they're not treated with dignity either." Marcus nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that. What did you have in mind?" Over the next hour, they discussed plans to extend the Dignity Project throughout Sterling Industries' entire supply chain. It would be complicated and expensive, but they both believed it was necessary. When their meeting ended, Thomas walked back through the building toward the parking garage. He passed by the custodian's closet where he used to store his cleaning supplies. A young man was there now, someone he'd helped get the job when he moved to his new position. "Hey, Thomas," the young man called out. "Or should I say Mr. Thomas now?" Thomas laughed. "Just Thomas is fine. How are things going?" "Good, good. Hey, I wanted to tell you, my supervisor said Sterling Industries is raising the base pay for all facility staff, and we're getting full health benefits now, not just the basic plan. Is that because of you?" Thomas felt a warmth in his chest. "It's because of all of us. Because we're trying to remember that everyone who works here deserves to be treated with respect." "Well, thank you. It makes a real difference for people like me." As Thomas drove home that evening, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. From emptying trash cans to sitting in board meetings. From being invisible to being heard. From surviving to thriving. He thought about his daughter, who was now thinking about which college to attend. She wanted to study engineering, wanted to build things that mattered. She'd told him she wanted to work for Sterling Industries someday, and not just because her father worked there, but because she believed in what they were doing. When he walked into his house, Maria was cooking dinner. She turned and smiled when she saw him. "How was your day?" she asked. "Good," he said, kissing her cheek. "Really good." As they sat down to dinner together, Thomas reflected on what Marcus had asked him that night in the conference room so many months ago. What is the most important thing a company can create? He'd answered dignity, and he still believed that. But now he understood that dignity wasn't just a philosophy or a strategy. It was a practice, something you had to work at every single day. It meant seeing people, really seeing them. It meant listening, even when the truth was uncomfortable. It meant being willing to change, even when change was hard. Sterling Industries was far from perfect. There were still problems to solve, improvements to make, mistakes to correct. But they were moving in the right direction. They were remembering that business wasn't just about products and profits. It was about people. Always had been, always would be. And Thomas, the former janitor who had answered one question with uncommon wisdom, was helping to lead the way.
The story could end there, but life rarely wraps up so neatly. 3 years after Thomas took the position, Sterling Industries faced its biggest challenge yet. A competitor launched a product that was technologically superior to anything Sterling had created. Wall Street analysts predicted that Sterling would lose significant market share. The stock price began to drop. In an emergency board meeting, Robert Chen pushed for an immediate response. "We need to accelerate our development timeline," he argued. "We need to leapfrog their technology. We need to show the market that we're still the leaders in innovation." But Thomas disagreed. "If we rush, we'll make mistakes. We'll create products that are impressive but not useful. We'll lose sight of what actually matters." "What matters right now is staying competitive," Robert shot back. "We're losing ground every day we wait." Marcus looked at Thomas. "What do you propose?"
Thomas stood and walked to the whiteboard. "Instead of trying to beat them at their game, what if we play a different game entirely? What if we double down on what makes us different? We're not the company with the flashiest technology anymore. We're the company that creates products with purpose, products that genuinely improve people's lives, products made by a company that treats people with dignity." "That's not a competitive advantage," James said. "That's marketing fluff." "Is it?" Thomas challenged. "Pull up our customer satisfaction scores. Pull up our employee retention rates. Pull up our brand loyalty metrics. We're beating our competitors in every measure that actually matters in the long term. Yes, they have a sexier product right now, but products come and go. Culture, values, those last." He wrote a number on the whiteboard. "This is how much we spent on marketing last year. What if we took half of that budget and used it to make our workplace even better, to make our supply chain even more ethical, to make our products even more accessible to people who can't afford premium prices? What if we told that story, not through expensive ad campaigns, but through actions?" Sarah was nodding. "We could create a line of budget-friendly products that maintain our quality standards, but are accessible to lower-income families. We could showcase the real people who make our products. We could be transparent about our operations in a way no other major company is." Catherine pulled up a spreadsheet. "If we executed on this strategy, we'd take a short-term hit to margins, but our modeling shows that the long-term brand value could be substantial, especially with younger consumers who care about corporate ethics." Marcus looked around the table. "All in favor?" Every hand went up, even Robert's. The strategy worked, but not immediately. For 6 months, Sterling Industries continued to lose market share to their competitor. Financial journalists wrote articles questioning Marcus's leadership and Thomas's competence. Shareholder activists demanded changes. But Marcus and Thomas stayed the course. They launched a program to make their technology accessible to public schools in low-income areas. They published detailed reports on their supply chain and labor practices. They created a line of affordable products that worked seamlessly with their premium offerings, so families didn't have to choose between quality and cost. And slowly, gradually, the tide turned. Teachers posted videos of students using Sterling products to create amazing projects. Workers at Sterling supplier factories gave interviews about improved conditions. Parents shared stories of how Sterling products helped their children with disabilities communicate and learn. The viral moments weren't planned by marketing departments. They were organic, real, human. And they were far more powerful than any advertising campaign could have been. Within a year, Sterling Industries had not only regained their lost market share, but exceeded it. More importantly, they had redefined what success looked like in their industry. Other companies began to follow their lead, improving worker conditions, focusing on purpose-driven innovation, prioritizing long-term value over short-term gains.
Thomas became a sought-after speaker, invited to conferences and universities to talk about his journey and his philosophy. He always felt uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm not special," he would say. "I'm just someone who refused to forget where I came from." But Marcus knew better. Thomas was special precisely because he had never forgotten. He had carried his empathy, his humanity, his understanding of what real people needed from the custodian's closet to the boardroom. And in doing so, he had transformed not just a company, but an entire approach to business. On the 5th anniversary of Thomas's appointment, Sterling Industries held a company-wide celebration. Employees from every level of the organization gathered in the main auditorium. Marcus asked Thomas to say a few words. Thomas stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. "5 years ago," he began, "I was cleaning this very room, invisible to most of you. I never imagined I'd be standing here, speaking to you as an executive. But here's what I've learned in these 5 years. Everyone in this room has value. Everyone has insights. Everyone deserves to be heard." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "We talk a lot about innovation, about disruption, about changing the world. But real change doesn't come from technology alone. It comes from how we treat each other. It comes from recognizing the humanity in everyone we encounter, whether they're a customer, a colleague, a competitor, or a custodian." The room was silent, everyone hanging on his words. The question Mr. Sterling asked me that night, "What is the most important thing a company can create?" I've thought about that question every single day since, and my answer hasn't changed. Dignity. But I understand now that dignity isn't something you create once and check off a list. It's something you practice every day, in every interaction, in every decision. He smiled. So my challenge to all of you is this. In your work tomorrow, ask yourself, am I creating dignity? Am I seeing the people I interact with as complete human beings? Am I using my talents and position to make someone's life genuinely better? If you can answer yes to those questions, then you're doing work that matters. And that's what Sterling Industries is all about. The applause was thunderous. People stood, some wiping tears from their eyes. Thomas stepped down from the podium, still uncomfortable with being the center of attention. Marcus met him at the bottom of the stairs. "That was perfect." I meant every word. "I know you did. That's why it was perfect." As the celebration continued around them, with music and laughter and the joy of people who genuinely liked working together, Thomas felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his own transformation, but for being part of something larger, for being part of a community that was proving you could be successful and humane, profitable and principled, innovative and compassionate. That night, driving home under a sky full of stars, Thomas thought about the young janitor who would be cleaning the Sterling Industries offices tomorrow morning. He thought about what dreams that person might have, what potential they might possess, what wisdom they might hold. And he made a mental note to learn their name, to see them, to remember that everyone has something valuable to offer if we're willing to listen. Because that's what dignity means. Not charity, not pity, but genuine recognition that every person matters. Every person has worth. Every person deserves to be seen and heard and valued. It was a simple idea, really, but Thomas had learned that the most powerful ideas often are. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person emptying the trash cans knows more about what really matters than all the PhDs and MBAs in the boardroom. Sometimes, the janitor has the answer that changes everything.